Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're looking at a true anomaly. I mean, a place that seriously seems to exist in an entirely different dimension than the rest of the world. Picture a nation of just 5.6 million people. It's freezing, it's geographically isolated, and honestly, historically, kind of a tough place to pitch a tent. Yet, against all odds, this small Nordic nation has built what a lot of people consider an absolute utopia. Yep, we're talking about Norway. So how exactly did a country so far removed from the massive industrial hubs of the world achieve such an unbelievable standard of living?
Okay, let's dive right into this, because the wealth disparity here is genuinely jaw-dropping. Norway's GDP per capita is hovering right around $90,000. That is absolutely staggering. To put that into perspective, it's more than double the GDP per capita of a major European economy like Italy, and it even officially surpasses the economic powerhouse of the United States. That single data point alone is enough to raise an eyebrow. But you know, what makes Norway a true paradox isn't just the sheer volume of money they have.
It's this number, 98%. Keep in mind, Norway isn't just one of the richest countries on the planet, it's also one of the absolute greenest. A staggering 98% of their domestic electricity comes entirely from renewable sources. They've essentially constructed one of the cleanest energy systems ever conceived. And this right here establishes the core anomaly of our explainer today. How on earth did a sparsely populated, freezing, and isolated country manage to become unfathomably wealthy while simultaneously financing an almost total 100% green energy transition?
To solve this mystery, we've got to travel back in time a bit. Section 1. The 1969 discovery, finding Ecofisk. So prior to 1969, the North Sea was basically considered this hostile, unforgiving environment. It was deemed way too expensive to explore. The geology was totally uncertain. Honestly, nobody really believed there was anything of immense value hiding down there. But then, literally, everything changed. In 1969, they discovered Ecofisk, which turned out to be one of the largest oil fields in all of Europe. And that single event triggered a massive chain reaction, moving us through the oil crisis of 1973, the creation of their massive wealth fund in 1990, all the way up to their modern reality of 96% electric vehicle sales.
Now, as we know, finding oil is one thing, but managing it, that's a whole different ballgame. When most countries strike oil, they launch into these reckless spending sprees. But Norway made a highly disciplined, completely different choice. The government declared a very simple philosophy: the petroleum must belong to the state. Instead of letting private companies just run away with the profits, they created a public entity called State Oil to directly control the extraction. On top of that, they imposed incredibly high taxes on any private oil companies operating in their waters. This ensured the vast majority of those profits flowed right directly into the public treasury.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, managing the riches.
And wow, what an engine it is. That is 2 with 12 zeros behind it. $2 trillion. In 1990, the government created the Government Pension Fund Global, which most people just call the Oil Fund. When it started out, it was worth a relatively modest $300 million. But today, it's ballooned into the largest sovereign wealth fund on the entire planet. The really brilliant part was their strategy, though. Instead of injecting all that cash into their own economy, which, let's be real, would have caused massive inflation, they decided to invest those proceeds almost entirely abroad.
And this brilliantly illustrates the mind-bending scale of what they've actually built. The Norwegian Oil Fund essentially owns 1.5% of every single publicly listed company on Earth. Just let that sink in for a second. They also own a staggering 3% of the entire European stock market, alongside thousands of investments in real estate, infrastructure, and renewable energy around the globe. And it's a completely transparent portfolio, too. You can literally look it up in real time online.
But here is the real secret to their success. It's a concept known as the Golden Rule. The rule is super simple. The government must never, ever touch the principal capital. No exceptions. They're only allowed to withdraw the expected annual yield of the fund, which historically averages out to about 3% to 4%. They use just that small percentage to fund the state budget. This strict economic discipline is what actually made Norway rich. It wasn't just the sheer luck of finding oil, it was the unprecedented self-control of knowing exactly what to do with it. They transformed finite oil into a permanent, stable flow of wealth.
So, with that massive financial backing secured, let's look at Section 3, the Green Revolution, electrifying society.
Norway's green transition can essentially be broken down into a sort of rule of 3. They methodically electrified their entire society across 3 major pillars. First, building a massive hydroelectric grid. Second, installing clean heat pumps in almost every home. And third, putting electric vehicles on their roads. Let's break down exactly how they executed each of these monumental steps.
The very first step was harnessing their unique geography. Norway is a land sculpted by ancient glaciers, towering mountains, and rushing rivers. Their natural water reservoirs are so vast, they actually contain 50% of the entire water storage capacity of Europe. That's huge. By heavily investing in hydroelectric power throughout the 20th century, they effectively turned their harsh, mountainous terrain into a gigantic natural battery. So even during times of drought, the melting glaciers and massive reservoirs guarantee a constant, steady flow of 100% clean electricity.
But generating clean electricity is only half the battle, right? You also have to use it efficiently. Following the brutal oil crisis of 1973, the government decided that relying on fossil fuels to heat homes in a country that's practically frozen half the year was just too dangerous. So they introduced punishing carbon taxes, which drove citizens straight toward electric heat pumps. Today, roughly 2/3 of Norwegian homes use them. That's nearly 666 per 1,000 people, which completely dwarfs Italy at 184 and Germany at just 63. When a Norwegian turns on the heat, it's clean hydropower doing all the heavy lifting.
The third pillar of their green revolution is transportation, and honestly, the numbers here are frankly unbelievable. For 2025, Norway sits at a dominant 96% EV market share. Meanwhile, the rest of Europe is trailing at 23%, and the US is way back at 7%. In Norway, electric cars haven't just become popular, they've officially surpassed the total number of diesel vehicles circulating on their roads.
So how exactly did they achieve nearly 100% EV adoption? Well, it was a brilliantly simple yet incredibly expensive strategy. They basically made traditional combustion engines insanely expensive through heavy taxation, and they made electric vehicles unbelievably convenient. EVs enjoy 0% value-added tax. This means a high-end electric car can often cost less than your standard diesel sedan. Then you add in reduced tolls, free parking, access to bus lanes, and a charging network so extensive it reaches the most remote rural areas. In Norway, range anxiety simply doesn't exist. You're probably more likely to run into a moose out there than run out of battery.
So, the crucial point is, who actually paid for all this? The hydroelectric dams, the massive EV incentives, the charging stations, all that infrastructure? I mean, it all comes with a colossal price tag. How does a society afford to completely re-engineer itself to be that green?
That question brings us to the final and most paradoxical chapter of the Norwegian economic miracle, Section 4, The Price of Green, Fossil Fuel Reality.
Right behind the pristine air and the silent electric cars lies this number, 1.7 million. That's the number of barrels of oil that Norway exports every single day. The reality is that the illusion of a purely green economy ends right at their borders. While they operate a completely clean domestic society, they are pulling up and shipping out millions of barrels of fossil fuels daily to the rest of the world.
If we look at their economy neutrally, the influence of fossil fuels is just unavoidable. The oil and gas sector makes up a massive 25% of their total GDP. Furthermore, it accounts for more than half of all their exports and generates about 30% of the state's total revenue. Hundreds of thousands of Norwegian jobs are tied directly or indirectly to the oil and gas industry. Essentially, fossil fuels are the heavy lifting mechanism strongly subsidizing their entire green transition.
It creates an incredible juxtaposition. On one hand, you have a 98% green domestic power grid. But on the other hand, Norway is currently supplying 40% of the gas consumed in Europe. Especially following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Norway really stepped up to become Western Europe's absolute biggest fossil fuel supplier. So they're the clean green utopia that also just so happens to be the continent's primary dealer of oil and gas.
And that leads us to the ultimate summary of this grand paradox. The world's cleanest, fastest energy transition was entirely bankrolled by fossil fuels. And look, this is just an impartial fact of their economic model. Without the unbelievable wealth generated by their offshore oil rigs, this rapid and profound green revolution, the tax breaks, the infrastructure, the heat pumps, it all would have simply been impossible. It is a uniquely fascinating yet entirely unrepeatable model for any other nation.
Which leaves us with one final thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Can a green utopia truly exist if it is ultimately funded by the very problem it is trying to solve? It's a fascinating paradox, a total masterpiece of economic discipline, and a profound contradiction all rolled into one. Thanks for joining me on this explainer today. and keep questioning how the world around us is really built.